On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, paying for parents without losing your sanity. So, welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Shawn Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law. And not only am I remote, but I am also joined remote by your financial coach, George Corbello. How you doing, George?
Doing well, Sean. I hope you guys can hear me well. But doing here, I'm here in New York City, and I'm actually recording in the room that I was raised in. My mother's been in the Bronx here in New York for 40 plus years. So it's weird to be in the same room that I was raised in with my sister. We had, twin beds and stuff in this room. And let me tell you, this room is small. Like I didn't realize like boy, we did a lot, in
It,
such a small apartment, small room. So it's amazing.
is the room small or did you get bigger?
I'm gonna say the room got smaller because there's no way I got bigger as I got older. That's not even remotely an option here. But doing
You
well,
know,
brother, doing well.
so it's funny. As we record this, it's a couple weeks prior to when we're going to release it because just the way our schedules worked out. When this episode comes out, I will be my first week back from spring break,
Yeah.
and for our spring break, we're going from Tampa. We're going to head down to Naples, spend a couple
Ooh,
days in
nice.
Naples. Then we're going to go down to the Keys, spend a couple days in the Keys, and then we're going to go to Boca Raton and spend a couple days in Boca with family. But one of the things that I had kind of considered, so my parents have only lived in three houses my entire life. The house that I grew up in, then right before my sister went away to college, they bought their second house in Miami. And then they bought their house in Tallahassee when my dad retired. And so I had kind of considered, I guess we'll see, depends on what the timing is. I'd kind of considered driving my boys back by the house that I grew up in. I don't,
Why
somebody else
not?
owns it now, so I don't have the
You
ability to
can't
go
get in,
inside.
right? But you can at least, like here's the neighborhood. Then just show them those kind of. I love the. It's weird, but it is very nostalgic. Again, first of all, New York City. I'm here, and I'm just like, oh boy, never again. Like I was raised a city boy, but I'm good. Like this,
I,
there's enough.
as,
We're good there.
as soon as I cross into Miami, I'm ready to leave Miami. I No, and that's part of the issue that I don't know right now is, my son was saying to me yesterday, well, how far is it to get from this point to this point to this point? And I said, dude, Miami is 2 hours away from Miami. So, it
It's
doesn't
good.
matter. It'll take me
True.
about 4 hours to get from Tampa to the outskirts of the Miami Fort Lauderdale area, and then probably another hour to get wherever I'm going in that,
Correct.
tri-county.
Yeah, I realized that when we went to my brother's wedding in Miami as well. Beautiful area we were in, near like Miami Beach, that Miami area. But boy, the traffic, you're absolutely. I mean, the thing is too, it's like New York too. It's like construction that's been there for like 7 years and it's like never
Yeah.
gonna end. So that's the other
Yep.
thing that we were maneuvering through. But yeah, it was again real nice area, but you're right. It feels like 2 miles takes 40 minutes. It's just like okay, I guess that's you got to get used to that when you're in a kind of a bigger city.
Yeah, when I lived in Miami, I knew all the shortcuts. So it was about an hour and a half drive from my apartment to my office, but I could cut it down to about 55 minutes because I knew I would cut through this parking lot and I would go
Right.
around that back road and
Yeah,
I
you
would,
just drive on the sidewalk, no big deal. You just
yeah,
got to
there
move the
you go.
people out of the way. Get out
Hey,
of
all
here,
the
people.
pedestrians need to watch out for me. So you and I think, have officially entered into the sandwich generation.
Yes.
So I don't know if I've even talked about. I think I might have talked about this. My dad passed in November, and
Yeah.
so I've been helping out my mom, not necessarily financially, but I've been helping my mom in terms of, now she's the one in charge of paying the bills.
Right.
She's the one in charge of managing the finances. She's the one in charge of all that stuff. So I've been helping her with that. At the same time, I'm trying to teach my kids about money.
Yeah.
And my son is getting on my nerves because my older son, my older son said, "Well, Dad, if I get straight A's, can I get the latest, whatever Xbox, whatever the latest thing
Right.
is?" Plus his Nintendo Switch broke. And so it's, hey, if I get
Oh,
straight A's, can you get me a new Nintendo Switch? And I'm like, dude, I've got um I've got the summer camps coming up that I've got to pay for. I've got
Yep.
the spring break trip that we're about to take that I've got to pay for. I've got all these other expenses coming up right now in the spring. I don't have extra money laying around to buy you a new Switch, to buy you the
Yep.
latest, gaming console, whatever. So I've got my mom on one side asking me to help her reconcile her checkbook, and I've got my son on the other side asking me to spend money that I don't have. So welcome to the sandwich generation.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say the same thing. And again, you have younger, right? I have. So again, my mom, has she's been suffering through a lot of dementia the past, probably 8+ years. So obviously, home care and support has been real critical when it comes to, long-term care for her and getting her the right support that's needed. But then again, you're right. It's like, okay, making sure she has the needs that she's covered from a housing perspective, for the health care, for the support she needs. Because again, she needs 24-hour care now at this point. So that's one thing we've been working through. And then you're right. And I've got a 21-year-old in college, right? So you got to deal with tuition and books and things like that. And then I've got a rising 16-year-old star who's either going to college or Broadway. So you pick her. I'm open. Go to the one that makes money.
Right.
Unless there's scholarships along the way. So I think I get you because for me it's the ticket items just go up. I'd be a Switch, dude. I'll buy your son a Switch. That's an easy cost right now. I've got
Hang on.
like I need a car.
He's here in the other room as we're recording this. I can call him in here
I
and
think
have
I
you
got an
tell him that.
extra one for him. Don't worry about it. There's one at the garage. We can get him that easily. But those are the things like as they get older, the needs and the expense goes up. There's just no, yeah, and you're right. Like how stressed do you feel? Like I feel at times where it's like, there's a lot that needs to be done, as a parent, as husband and a spouse. And you're, God bless you, you're doing this, as a single dad. So that I'd imagine there's ultimate, stress that can come along with a lot of those things. I think the only thing we could say, yeah, we're blessed in a sense of like, okay, there's consistent income, you've got the business that's thriving, there's all those kind of things that are happening. And but imagine those who are having the same issues and they're just like, okay, how do I make ends meet? What am I
Yeah.
doing to if I got to do Ubers and do second jobs and third jobs to do these kind of things? I'd imagine the level of stress is even tenfold.
Yeah, so a couple things. This trip we're going on, we're going it the end of spring break is going to be a family bat mitzvah,
Yeah.
and it's my late wife's side of the family. So I was talking to my mother-in-law yesterday, and she said, "Yeah, we'll see you in Boca." And I said, "Oh, you all are going?" She said, "Yeah." Well, the problem is my wife's grandmother is still with us, 94 years old, I think. She's,
God bless. Yeah.
yeah, but we don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to say that. And
Right.
so
Well, I mean, that's the inevitable, right? Now you're right
it
there.
is. And
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I know better than anybody it's going to happen to all of us. But the challenge there is, for those who don't know the geography of Florida, Tampa's on the West Coast, Boca Raton's on the East
On
Coast.
the east. Yeah.
Tampa's kind of central, Boca's kind of southern,
Yeah.
and
You got to go
there's
down.
no direct line. So
Mm,
you
that's a
either
good
have to
point.
go across I-4 and
Oof.
down, or you
No.
have to go down to Naples over
And
Alligator
then,
Alley 75 and then up. There's no direct
yeah,
roads that really, unless you want to take like back roads and whatnot, but there's no real direct road that connect
direct
the two.
highway kind of main interstate kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And so their concern was, my in-laws' concern was, how do we leave Tampa for 2, 3 days and leave great grandma here alone? And so that's another concern that they have in terms of how are we going to make this vacation work. So I think we're going to figure it out. I think everybody ultimately is going to be okay. We'll do what we need to do, but but yeah, so there that comes with the stress of, not only the stress of how do we manage our lifestyle, but the stress of what do we do when we have a young kid? What do we do when we have an
Yeah.
elderly parent? The other thing that occurred to me from what you said, yeah, I joke all the time that if I had to get another job, I'd just drive, if the law firm started to suffer, I don't care. I'll work at McDonald's, I'll work here, I'll work there. I just had a client that was in a bankruptcy, and it's a Chapter 13, so it's a payment plan bankruptcy. And the bankruptcy trustee said, I don't know that you have enough income to fund this bankruptcy plan. And so the client said to me, well, what do I do? And I said, well, maybe you get another job. Oh, no, I couldn't. I don't have the hours. I don't have this. I don't have that. Well, the only other way to generate more net income is to cut expenses. So what,
Yeah,
you know, don't go out to dinner as much. Don't buy as much groceries. Cut some of those subscriptions that you have. Cut.
correct.
Oh no, I couldn't do that. Well, how else are you
That's
going
a
to come up with the money
sacrifice.
to fund the plan? Right.
Right,
So
right.
what are you willing to sacrifice for that? But um, I don't know. What else?
I mean, the thing that I've been, obviously knowing what that looks like too. I think a lot of us, when we're in the middle, it's, what could I mean, at the end of the day, I always say you have to still take care of your situation first. Meaning, we want to help our parents, we need to help our kids, but as parents ourselves, and as the folks in the middle, what's your financial future looking like? What are some of the things that you need to put in place? So I always still say, like, before you help your parents out, you need to make sure that you're stable in your situation. Emergency fund still needs to be in place. Now the emergency fund definition maybe expands. Maybe it's not just your tires, maybe it's medical care that might be needed for mom and dad if they don't have their financial situation in place. So those are the things that, like, maybe you have to expand on some of the goals necessary for those savings.
Yeah.
Maybe in the budget you're putting more towards their medical, your medical, kids medical. So it's just added burden, and of course the expenses. I mean, everything still seems to be rising. As much as we feel like, okay, when is the stability going to come? Like, I want boring stability where just prices are cheap, or stable, where it's not just this constant rising. And our spending plans seem to be changing every month. Okay, here's groceries, all right, now it's medical, now it's transportation. So there's just never this never ending cycle of, like, okay, when will, I don't want to call it inflation, but when will all of these rising costs just slow down,
Yeah.
for it? So there's just more stress that way too.
It reminds me of um, when we were talking couple episodes ago, about a month ago now, we talked to Shannon Miller Lutz,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
one of the things that she said that really stuck with me, you can't pour from an empty cup, take care of yourself first.
Yes,
I
exactly.
actually wrote that quote down because it had
It's a really good one.
such an impact on me. I think that was a tremendous quote. And the other thing that I was kind of thinking of, especially in terms of caring for an elderly adult, caring for our aging generation,
Right.
you've also got, like you said, the rising cost of medical bills,
Hmm.
the rising cost of health insurance, or
Yep.
when do we look at Medicare, Medicaid, and you typically have to get, and it's not something that I do. I do have attorney friends of mine that'll do Medicare planning, Medicaid planning.
You
So you
got a
got to
girl
worry
and a
about,
guy for that. We good.
yeah, I'm not, that's a totally different skill set.
Right.
Um, but then the other thing, something that I've had to watch out for, not only for myself, but for my mom, there's a lot of fraud, especially when an
Yeah.
elderly parent passes and you've got one left. There's a tremendous amount of fraud. My mom is getting letters that she'll call me and she'll say, "Should I pay this bill?" And I'll say, "Well, is the bill in your name or dad's name?" "Well, it's in dad's name." "Okay, is your name anywhere on that bill?" "Yes or no." If your name is anywhere on that bill, you might be liable for it. You got to pay it.
Correct.
If your name's not on that bill, that obligation, I mean, unless it's like, electricity, but otherwise that obligation died with dad. You don't necessarily have to
You
pay
don't
it.
have to. Okay.
And I can't tell you how many times I get a text message that I owe a toll from some, I'm getting those at, but
Oh,
if
and UPS fraud, and like,
UPS,
it's,
but
yeah,
what if somebody elderly that's not really computer savvy? I got the other day. So 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I'm helping a client of mine sell a piece of property down in Clearwater, and they're doing it without a realtor. They've already found the buyer, so I was creating
sure.
the contract for them. Well, they're elderly, so they're up in Michigan. And so they said, can you send the contract to my Michigan attorney? The Michigan attorney will print it out, will have us sign it, he'll scan it and email it back to you. I said, great. So I do all that. About a day later, I get this random email from the Michigan attorney, or what was looking to be the Michigan attorney, but
Yeah,
it was like this goofy email address, and it said, click here to validate your documents and do this and
right.
do that. And I actually had to send a separate email to the Michigan attorney saying,
Just to
hey,
confirm.
did you send me something? And his response was, it was weird. His response was, well, you sent me something. And I'm like, yeah, but I sent it to you from my regular Gmail account with
Right.
there was no, the way you sent it to me was
DocuSign or whatever,
right.
like you gotta be careful with those too. It's just weird how some of this stuff works.
But my first thought was, if my mom were to get an email like this that were spam,
You could click, you should just click it.
yeah, and now whoever it is has access to all of her stuff. So you really got to be careful about fraud.
I would agree. Fraud, scams and fraud on that elderly abuse, it definitely seems to be running rapid. I mean, I think too, what I've been seeing is, some of the things to avoid when it comes to this as well is the kind of like you're making financial decisions. Two things that really is financial decisions that don't drain your savings or your retirement either. I think a
Right.
lot of times we feel like we have the obligation to help our parents. And it's not that we don't want to. That's not the case, but if you give up your future in order to provide the support that's needed for your parents, what ends up happening is when you become their age, the cycle just repeats and the cycle continues from that
Dude,
standpoint.
my goal is for my son to be a professional soccer player and retire me. That's not a
I
good
mean, if
plan.
it if oh, I got the Broadway show Star Girl too. I was like, she's gonna pay the house off.
What is
But
it? Tonys are Broadway awards, the Tonys.
Tony's is musical theater and Broadway, correct? So
Okay.
she's,
Well,
she'll win, but she's gonna do all of them. She says, she's gonna go for the Grammy and the Tony and the Oscar and the blah 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 blah. Or like, okay, girl, whatever. The EPCOP or
hey,
ECOP or whatever.
when she gets the MTV award, then we know she's made it.
Then we know she's made it. Exactly, exactly. Even though the
So
channel doesn't exist, she gets the award, so it's okay.
there you go. Well, MTV hasn't played music videos since we were teenagers.
Real long time ago. They did? Oh wow. Okay.
They used to. I remember at one point when MTV played videos. Um, Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Would you suggest being on the bank account of your elderly relative?
Ooh. So as they get older, so again, I'll use, what we did with my mom. I'm actually advocating that with my in-laws as well. You get to a certain age, there's signs of dementia, there's signs of we're not as sharp as we were when we're in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. So we get that.
Right.
Do you get to a point where, for me, there has to be signs where it's like, okay, they used to be really good with money or they get money. When I hear things like, I went to the bank 3 times this week. They're like, well, where's the money? Like took out money and stuff like that. Well, where's the money? I don't know. Or I don't know where it is, or I misplaced it, or I paid the rent when we pay the rent automatically. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
those are signs where it's like, okay, power of attorney and just saying, hey, I need access into the account just to make sure that there's no, you don't want them to drain their own finances just because they're, overpaying rent or doing those kind of things itself. So for me, there had to be, for me, is warning signs. There, like, I want to let my parents be as independent as possible for as long as they can, but it's not going to be forever. So you just have to be a lot more attentive to those situations. And then, yeah, I mean, for me, it's like if we got the power of attorney for that support to be able to help them, not completely, we can make decisions on their behalf, but it wasn't to the point where it's like they can't do anything for themselves. It's really more of just start the transition so that, if we needed to make decisions on their behalf, we had access to the accounts, we had access to insurance, because again, insurance won't talk to you if you're not Again, if there's
Right.
no power of attorney or anything like that, they won't even talk to you in regard for. So we needed those things as they aged. And again, father-in-law's 78 or close to 80. Mother-in-law's 75. My mom's 75. So I mean, get to a point where it's like, yeah, like I mean, I'm here to help. If I can help you with managing your finances and there's money to financially responsibly manage,
Right.
let's go. I'll help you make sure we last as long as it can be. I don't
I,
worry about inheritances, right? We worry about
right.
like make sure that they can enjoy life or they're taken care of. That for me is what I would want to be more focused on.
Well, and I think the thing for me, so luckily, after my dad passed, my mom had found out that my dad was starting to slip um, mentally.
Yeah,
He may have been dealing. Now he was also dealing with dialysis, which takes some out of you
yeah.
mentally and physically. He was diabetic. He had
Diabetes
heart
does.
issues.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
dealing with a bunch of stuff. But he actually, we were lucky because it went the other way. So instead of money disappearing and going, hey, what is going on with this money?
Sure.
My mom would say, I've reconciled the bank account and I say that we have blank amount of, whatever. And I'm gonna make up numbers.
Yeah.
My checkbook says I have $1,000 in it,
Right.
but the bank says I have $10,000 in it. And I'm like, well, okay, good, because if your check, my mom's old fashioned,
Yeah.
handwritten check
Checkbook.
register, everything. And so if my mom's checkbook says, if her check register says she has $1,000 in it, she's not going to spend more than $1,000. So the fact that the bank says she has 10 grand in it, that's a good thing. She's
Correct.
not going to spend
Yeah,
all that
that's you.
money.
You're in the right direction there for
Right.
sure.
What we learned was my dad was liquidating. So my dad would set up all these CDs. He'd make banks compete against each other. This one is a half a point more for 6 months than that one. And this one, if you do an 8 month, you get an extra, half a point. And this one is, and so we would always kind of compare. And he had different CDs that matured at different times of the year in various different banks all around. And so he would cash them in and like put them in the bank instead of rolling them over. And he wouldn't tell my mom. And so
Uh,
the financial advisors are meeting with my mom and saying, well, how much money do you need a month to live off of? And we'll pull from my
yeah,
parents' retirements and pensions and social security, and we'll calculate that number you need to live on. They're not able to properly calculate that number because all this other money from all these other sources is
well, no,
coming into the bank.
that's great, but at the same
It's
time, you just
great, but it's scary. And what if it had been
yeah,
worse?
what it was, and that's like right. It's usually it's the opposite
Right.
situation where it's people are going and the money is going another right. So great job there, Dad. Thank you for that
Yeah.
for sure. But I
Thank you,
think
Dad,
it's
for
still
that.
the same question. It's you still if you can't answer questions on like where is this coming from, how is this going, where are you spending, that for me I agree. But here's the then you have the problem like let's say you have multiple siblings, who takes responsibility? Because if you have one person who has power of attorney, that makes sense. If you have three people, that means three people have to be in agreement in order to execute a particular order, right? So that's another thing you have to be cautious. Like I did that with my
Yeah.
sister, and I said, "Look, I'm not going to make it harder for my sister." I said, "Look, you're close to mom. You make all the decisions. If you need anything or extra money or anything like that, just let us know, and we'll
Yeah.
provide the support." But it didn't make sense to be like, just because I need, like some power trip itself, like I need to be involved. Let me be, like I have to be in every decision. I'm like, no, I know it's not that easy, but I'm just saying, like, I want from my sister for that. So that's another big decision families would have to make because I've seen fights over who gets access because they're thinking inheritance and all this other. And I'm like, guys, like, not the right time to have those conversations.
Yeah. Some of the nastiest fights I've ever seen are between family members of,
Yeah,
I want my inheritance. I want
that's
mom.
my money, whatever. I'm
I,
like, what?
I've
Oof,
been,
gross,
you know,
not good.
we're kind of running out of time, but one of the lawsuits that I do a lot of are
Yeah.
partition lawsuits, and I'm about to do one. Brother and sister inherited property, and this is
Hmm.
typically the way a partition lawsuit will happen. Brother and sister inherited dad's house when dad died. Sister says, cool, I get to live in dad's house for free. Brother says, that's my inheritance. I want my money. And they
Mm,
start fighting over it. We're kind of the opposite in my family, is that I think I tend to be the better one with money because I've got the accounting background and the bankruptcy and the I have a whole podcast, if you didn't know, about how to eliminate debt. So I happen to be the better one in terms of money in my family. So even though my sister lives in Tallahassee, where my mom lives, I think I'm still the one in charge kind of what's going on
right.
with money. Now, at the end of the day, I'm sure my mom is getting input from my sister as well.
Of
And
course.
and I would like to think that I don't care.
Right.
When if something were to happen to mom, my sister and I would be taken care of, whether it's a 50-50 split, whether, she gets 60, I get 40, as long as I can take care of myself and the boys. I think my dad has set us up well enough that the number at the end of the day really isn't going to matter. So, but I think that is a really good point. Some of the nastiest fights I've ever seen
Yeah,
come down to when one family member says, "I want my inheritance," and the other
pretty
family
much.
member, right? Well, I took care of mom, so why should you get
Right.
the
And
same
that's
amount of money that
even,
I get because I spent all this time taking care of
boy,
mom?
that's what the scary part would be too, is kind of like if you have multiple siblings and you have one that is closer and does all the work itself, is there an entitlement to, if there is money or anything like that? And it's just more of like, right, unless it's in the will or in the
Yeah,
trust or anything like that, you need to make sure, because if not, we all will have different opinions on how things should be done. And like I said, it's not the right time to be having those
yeah.
conversations.
And I think that's the most important thing. If you're the parent listening to this, the most important thing is that you write it down in your will, in
Yeah,
your trust. You write it down in a formal legal document that you have an attorney help you prepare, and then that way, when you are gone, your kids can't fight over it because your intentions in what that attorney drafted are clear. So,
yeah, I
um,
agree. I agree.
unfortunately, I've kind of got a hard stop coming up here.
Well, you don't
So,
have to tell the audience that. You could just say, you know what, the good conversation. We'll continue it. We'll continue it in the next episode, or in a future episode there, my friend, because it is an important topic. Maybe, you know what, I'll even say, Sean, maybe we'll go and find a someone we can interview that we can continue this brilliant conversation itself.
so let's see how good your editing skills are before I upload this
No,
podcast.
it's gonna
But
be like and then
yeah, so great conversation, George. Why don't we continue this? Why don't we find another expert who can come on the show with us and continue
absolutely.
this great conversation?
I agree, my friend.
But in the meantime, George and I both have to fund our kids for retirement. So if you want to go to patreon.com/crushing debt, you can help us. And act seriously, honestly, that's for the costs of the production that we put into this
Right.
wonderful show every week. Patreon.com/crushing debt. Also, again, a big shout out to our friend Sam Cohen of Attorneys First Insurance. If you're an attorney or title company, you need malpractice coverage.
Yep.
Sam at attorneysfirst.com. I think we still have time when this episode comes out. We'll be about a month away ish from the PanCan Purple Stride Walk to help
Yes.
raise money for pancreatic cancer research. That's April 26th. It is all over the country. So whether you're local to Tampa Bay, we'll be at Steinbrenner Field over in Tampa. If you're not local to Tampa Bay, go to pancan.org or just search on Google for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. Find a
Yeah,
Purple Stride
local.
Walk near you. Whether you donate to my team or any other team, doesn't, as long as you take steps to help fund pancreatic cancer education, help fund programs for families going through it, that's what's most important to me.
Most important,
Um,
exactly.
I will put the link to our team on the show notes if you are interested, and I would really appreciate it. Other than that, go be New York,
Signing out
George.
from New York. I will curse out most of the drivers out here for you on your behalf, my friend. And I look forward to seeing you back in sunny Tampa in the next episode, my friend.
Sounds good. So we hope that you have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. And we will talk to you in next week's episode of the podcast.